I was living in a residential area and was buying some cigarettes at a supermarket before heading home. Then a young lady walked in to buy something. In that moment, I thought my heart had stopped. She was so beautiful, it was hard to believe a woman like her lived in our neighborhood. She walked into the supermarket with a poker face, her black hair flowing neatly down to her waist. She was wearing white stockings with black heels, which made her legs look even longer. Even at first glance, she had a pretty face. Despite living in this neighborhood for a decade, this was the first time I had seen her. She was so beautiful that I couldn't help but stare. The moment I saw her, my heart started to beat faster. She left with some groceries, and I quietly followed her to see where she lived. Her house was very close to mine, in a narrow place where only a single car could barely fit. I roughly memorized the location of her house. From that day on, I waited for her every evening at the supermarket. I waited for her every day, buying this and that, but it was in vain. I thought maybe she had only come to this neighborhood once, or perhaps she didn't live here. Then one Sunday afternoon, I saw her coming out of the women's bath at the public bathhouse. I was so glad to see her that I almost greeted her, but I didn't make that mistake. She was beautiful with her bare face, white and smooth skin. However, there was a little girl next to her. The girl asked, "Mom, can I sleep at Grandma's house tonight?" Here is the continuation of your story translated into English. I told her that I worked in the president's office. When she said she had never seen me at work, she approached me, asking incredulously if I really was the president. I asked if she lived in the neighborhood, and I said that I lived just around the corner. She invited me to come in and have a cup of coffee. She lived in an 18-pyong, approximately 60 square meters, townhouse with her daughter. There were men's shoes in the entrance. She told me she was separated from her husband, but I felt that was a defensive statement. People without a husband letting others know of the existence of a husband. She looked so beautiful drinking coffee with her feet neatly together. I took her photo off her resume and kept it in my wallet, hoping to get closer to her. A month passed, and during that time, I had coffee at her house twice and had dinner with her and her daughter. I didn't realize that living close could be such a big advantage. We started to exchange light jokes. Her daughter would come to my house to play on Sundays. I read a lot of books when I was young, and I utilized that to tell her old stories, which she loved. On Mondays when I met her, she would say, "Mr. President, please do the dishes right away." Her daughter had told her mother about my living situation. I told her that I worked in the president's office. When she said she had never seen me at work, she approached me, asking incredulously if I really was the president. I asked if she lived in the neighborhood, and I said that I lived just around the corner. She invited me to come in and have a cup of coffee. She lived in approximately 60 square meters townhouse with her daughter. There were men's shoes in the entrance. She told me she was separated from her husband, but I felt that was a defensive statement. People without a husband letting others know of the existence of a husband. She looked so beautiful drinking coffee with her feet neatly together. I took her photo off her resume and kept it in my wallet, hoping to get closer to her. A month passed, and during that time, I had coffee at her house twice and had dinner with her and her daughter. I didn't realize that living close could be such a big advantage. We started to exchange light jokes. Her daughter would come to my house to play on Sundays. I read a lot of books when I was young, and I utilized that to tell her old stories, which she loved. On Mondays when I met her, she would say, "Mr. President, please do the dishes right away." Her daughter had told her mother about my living situation. The biggest workshop of our company was held. Over 100 employees and executives stayed at a resort in Sirexan for 2 nights and 3 days. She also came, but not long after the event started. She got a call that her child had a high fever. All the other employees had come by bus, and I was the only one who had brought a car. I drove her home worried. She was anxious, contacting her mother who was looking after her child, and when we arrived home, her daughter was lying down weakly. Her mother said she would go home now. I suggested she stay the night as it was late, but she said she had nothing to do now that the mother was here and went home. She took the medicine bag from her mother and checked her daughter's temperature. Fortunately, her daughter's fever had gone down. She seemed very flustered. I asked for the thinnest towel and cooled her daughter's forehead with lukewarm water. She asked me to look after her daughter for a moment, and I reassured her and put her daughter to bed in the master bedroom. When I came out to the living room, thinking her fever had gone down a bit, she had prepared some drinks. She thanked me for driving her home and suggested I get some rest, saying I must be tired from all the driving. I thought to myself, what in the world? But I politely agreed. She thanked me for caring for her daughter and for not being able to attend the workshop because of her. She didn't drink because she was worried about her daughter, and I had a little bit of alcohol. Despite her flustered state, she made a delicious bowl of sea snail soup. As we sat facing each other and talked about various things, she told me that she lost her husband in an accident less than a year after giving birth to her daughter. She couldn't work because her daughter was young, but she moved to this neighborhood where her mother lives 3 months ago because her mother said she would look after her daughter once she starts elementary school next year. Her daughter is 7 years old now and goes to an academy in the afternoon. Her mother picks her up from the academy and takes her home to feed her dinner. She said it was hard raising her daughter alone, and it broke her heart to see her daughter growing up lonely without a father. People around her suggested that she remarry, but she said she couldn't muster the courage yet and wanted to take her time to think about remarriage. She asked me if I was married, and I told her that I had opportunities to marry the women I had met, but everything fell through due to complicated issues. As we shared various conversations, the alcohol started to take effect, and fatigue began to set in. She said, I've laid out a futon in the small room, please sleep there. When I entered the room, a silk golden quilt that one would use in a newlywed's home was neatly laid out. She said she would sleep in the master bedroom, and I thanked her for the delicious food. I covered myself with the fluffy quilt and fell asleep, but was awakened by the need to use the bathroom. When I opened the bathroom door, she was inside. She had just finished showering and was drying off. She covered herself in surprise, and I apologized and turned away. She quickly went back into her room, and I went to the bathroom and returned to my room. But I couldn't fall asleep. I was certain that God existed. A little later, the door to my room silently opened, and someone slipped under the covers. She said, Thank you so much for yesterday, sir. My daughter's fever has gone down. Can we be together today? She had a faint fragrance. I was thrilled to finally be one with her, whom I had been secretly in love with. After making love, I stroked her hair and she snuggled into my arms. She said she had been so lonely without her husband, and that she would never forget this time. She quietly locked the door and came to me, and we had another wonderful time. When Dawn came and her daughter went to kindergarten, we had another wonderful time. After that, we registered our marriage and moved to an apartment. A few months later, now a 12-week-old baby is in her lovely belly. We became a couple after the workshop. I hired a helper for the morning and afternoon to ensure that my beloved ladies lack nothing in their daily lives. She commutes with me and plans to take maternity leave right before her due date. My daughter is growing up very smart. She follows me well and calls me Dad, and we have a good time in bed with her now that she's in a stable period. Now all that's left is to live happily with her, whom I happened to meet at the supermarket. I am a lucky man. Hello, I'm a housewife who's been married for 28 years. having met my husband at a university social and then getting pregnant before marriage. I never expected that spending one night with my handsome husband would change my life so much. We have one daughter. Strangely, even if we had another child, I would miscarry quickly. In fact, my husband liked to go out, and I had to take full responsibility for making a living and raising our daughter, so it was too much to hope for another child. I had the mindset of raising just one child well, but our daughter had been difficult from a young age. I managed to get her to study enough to enter a four-year university and thought she would get a job without any problems. But in her first year of employment, she suddenly got pregnant and brought a man home to introduce him as her future husband. The man who was to be my son-in-law had a mediocre appearance and a decent job. However, he was 10 years older than my daughter and a bit timid, which made me a bit worried. We gave in to our daughter's insistence and allowed the marriage. The in-laws were old and financially very generous, so they suggested we should get them married as soon as possible. Our daughter was strong-willed, and my husband was not interested in housework or our daughter's affairs, so the wedding went smoothly. They said we wouldn't have to worry about anything because we were bringing in a young daughter-in-law who was 10 years younger. I thought it was a relief, but was I a bad parent? They went on a honeymoon, and I thought they would live happily ever after. But one day my son-in-law called in the middle of the night, and I rushed to the hospital, only to find out that my daughter had miscarried the child she had before marriage. My son-in-law was crying in the corner, and my daughter was calmly greeting me while playing with her phone. I was surprised, but I thought she needed to take care of her body, even though she didn't give birth, so I stayed at their house for a few days with my son-in-law's consent and helped with various house chores. My daughter was on leave from work, but she was thinking of quitting and starting a business, so she was just hanging around at home. I felt grateful to my son-in-law, who would bring home delicious food every day, even taking care of my share to look after our daughter. Perhaps my daughter felt comfortable knowing that I was taking care of most of the house chores. She started asking me to stay overnight. In fact, I started feeling attached to my daughter's newly house, where my daughter and my kind son-in-law were present, rather than being alone with my husband. However, I started noticing that the relationship between my daughter and son-in-law was becoming strained. Their conversations became less frequent, and my daughter would leave the house to hang out with her friends, timed with my son-in-law's arrival. My son-in-law and I would awkwardly, but not unpleasantly, eat dinner or watch TV together. As a month approached, my daughter spent more time outside, and I felt like it was time for me to leave as well. But when I tried to go back home, my son-in-law stopped me. He said that he often argued with our daughter when I wasn't around, and he couldn't even get a proper meal. Watching my daughter's married life for over a month reminded me of when I first got married. My husband barely came home, gave me just enough money for survival, and cut off his interest. I saw myself reflected in my son-in-law often and felt sorry for him, becoming more and more depressed, so I decided to stay and at least provide him meals. That day, my daughter hastily packed and left for her all-night trip with her college friends. My kind son-in-law was excited to give her some pocket money for the trip, seeing my daughter excited like before she got married. I had no choice but to send her off to have a good time. My son-in-law came home in the evening and suggested that we dine out for the first time. We left the vicinity of the house, tried out a hotel buffet for the first time in a long time, and went on a drive nearby until late at night. We came back home, and my son-in-law suggested we taste the wine he got as a gift from his company. The wine made me feel a bit tipsy. Recently, I had to stop several fights between my daughter and son-in-law, and I think I drank a bit more than usual, thinking there won't be any fights today. My son-in-law, who seemed to have accumulated a lot of resentment, started crying and venting his frustration. I felt guilty for raising my daughter wrong and seeing a grown man crying. I moved next to him to comfort him. As his tears started to subside, our eyes met. At that moment, my son-in-law's face came closer, and we naturally ended up in my room, spending the night together. I opened my eyes, still feeling a bit tipsy, and the events of the previous night flashed through my mind, causing me to practically leap out of bed. I remembered my son-in-law wiping my body with a warm water towel and even dressing me. While I was in a state of confusion, my daughter came home and started looking for me, which startled me, and I went out to the living room. A friend of hers, who had been drinking with her until morning, had brought her home, and she was lying on the floor, calling for me. I took her to the master bedroom, laid her down, and noticed that my son-in-law was not home. He must have gone to work. After tidying up my sleeping daughter's things and doing some housework, it was time for my son-in-law to finish work. As usual, my daughter and I were sitting on the sofa watching TV, but I was so nervous about how to react and what facial expression to make when my son-in-law walked through the front door that my heart was pounding. I've never sweated so much out of nervousness before. Unable to handle the tension, I said I was going to bed early because I was a bit tired and went to my room. My son-in-law came in. My daughter said first, "Mom's not feeling well, so she's gone to bed early. Let's order takeout." And my son-in-law agreed. They watched TV for a while and shared the takeout food, and soon the house was quiet. I fell asleep earlier than usual as the tension eased. However, the night I spent with my son-in-law kept coming back to me in my dreams, causing me to wake up several times. In my head, I kept telling myself that was wrong, and the guilt I felt towards my daughter was so intense it felt like my heart was being squeezed. But on the other hand, I felt a flutter of excitement at having found someone to fill the void left by my indifferent husband, who had been living like a recluse for a long time. I decided to return home as I couldn't stand it anymore and secretly left. But my son-in-law said he would take me, as if he was already awake. It seemed strange to refuse, so I got in his car and we drove home, not saying a word to each other. The tension in the car was unbearable, but as soon as I got home, I felt relieved. I returned to my normal life after a long time, but a few days later, I got a call from my daughter. At that moment, I thought she had found out everything, and I was shaking with fear. But my daughter was fine. She complained that the laundry was piling up, and the sink was full of dishes because I wasn't there, and asked me where I had been when it hadn't even been 2 months since she had a miscarriage. She told me to come home, throwing a tantrum that I couldn't tell was anger or irritation. I couldn't tell her the whole truth, and I couldn't ignore my daughter's anger. So I told her I would come in a few days. In the meantime, my son-in-law contacted me and said he wanted to meet outside once, which made my head spin. I got in his car that he brought to pick me up in front of my house, and we went to a quiet place in the suburbs to have a coffee and talk. He said, "I never really wanted to get married in the first place, and I never even thought about having children. I got married for my parents, so I don't really think about divorce, and my wife feels the same. We've agreed to respect each other's lives and live that way. I don't mind living like this." He explained about the agreement he had made with my daughter and the talks they had had before. He then expressed his wish to maintain a close relationship with me, his mother-in-law, as we have been doing. I was unable to respond with anything other than agreement, as I was trying to hide my strange excitement and anxiety, fearing that he might hear my heartbeat. When we got home, it was noticeably different from when I was around. The house was in a complete mess. My daughter and son-in-law had been living separate lives, each having their own room. It seemed less that they didn't touch each other, but rather they appeared more like a window shopping couple. During the day, I noticed that my daughter was communicating with someone new. When I asked her about it, she said her husband didn't care either way, and she was more than satisfied with the three of us, me, her, and her husband, living this way. She even suggested that I divorce my practically non-existent husband and start a new life, expressing her wish for me and her father to split up and for a complete merger with her and her husband's family. Apparently, she had also spoken to her father about it, but as always, he was indifferent and said he had already started another family, so he actually wanted to get a divorce and remarry. In fact, I had vaguely thought about it, but I'm now considering divorce. My daughter, on the other hand, seems to be keen on continuing her lifestyle of not caring about staying out all night or coming home in the morning to sleep, then going out again in the evening to have fun. On such nights, my son-in-law would signal for us to dine out. When I agree, he would go out for a while, then return to spend the night with me, whispering words of love. In fact, I guess I don't really hate the fact that I'm continuing this lifestyle. I've come to know my husband's true feelings, and in the midst of it all, my daughter is so much like her father, while my son-in-law treats me like a lover. All of this is very confusing, but it seems like everyone else would be happy if I just stayed still. The problem is that I don't feel unhappy about the current situation. Rather, I feel more vibrant than I have in the nearly 30 years of my married life. Unlike before, when everything felt lethargic and I just wanted to give up, my daughter may be out and about often, but she's also looking for a job and preparing to start her own business. It seems that they are managing well in terms of tax issues and financial support, considering their status as a married couple. However, they don't seem to be making any effort to restore their relationship as a couple, such as sharing a room or being intimate. My son-in-law continues to treat me better than anyone else, buying me gifts as if we were lovers, and even setting up dates. Every moment I spend with my daughter and son-in-law feels so happy at the time, but I'm also afraid of how long this situation can continue. When all of these relationships become known and end, I'll be left with neither a husband, a daughter, nor a son-in-law. I do not want to excuse myself by saying that I've done nothing wrong, but I'm tormented because I have no idea how to end this situation, fearing that if I continue just a little bit longer, it will eventually go awry. Interestingly, these days, as I act as a buffer between my daughter and son-in-law, they seem to live as if they were siblings. I can see that my son-in-law is getting used to switching his attitude towards me as a mother and as a lover. These are such peaceful days, but I really don't know if it's okay to maintain this painful state. Rather, I feel a sense of melancholy at the thought that I'm finally enjoying the joy of being a woman that I couldn't even experience after getting married and during my honeymoon. On the other hand, I always imagine the worst outcome due to the thought that this is a wrong relationship and I should correct it even now. What should I do?
Welcome to Cheating Tales Lab. We hope you enjoy the story. Let's begin. Ethan Hawthorne's phone buzzed with a text message. He glanced at the screen, seeing his wife Olivia's name. Medical conference in Chicago next week. Don't forget. Ethan's lips curved into a smile. He had an idea. With Olivia out of town, he could finally tackle that bedroom renovation project she'd been hinting at for months. What better way to show his love than surprising her with a freshly updated space? He headed to the hardware store, mind already racing with plans. Paint swatches, new curtains, maybe even that fancy light fixture she'd been eyeing. As he loaded supplies into the car, a tiny voice in the back of his mind whispered that something felt off about Olivia's text. He shook it off. After all, he was a 35-year-old high school history teacher, not some paranoid teenager. Back home, Ethan dove into the project with gusto. He moved furniture, taped off baseboards, and started emptying closets. That's when he found it. A plain shoebox tucked away in the far corner of Olivia's side. Curiosity got the better of him. He lifted the lid, expecting old photos or keepsakes. What he found instead made his blood run cold. Passionate love letters, signed simply A. Photos of Olivia with a man Ethan didn't recognize, looking far too intimate for comfort. 2 prepaid phones he'd never seen before. And most chilling of all, a handwritten note outlining a plan to deal with E permanently. Ethan's hands shook as he rifled through the contents. This couldn't be real. It had to be some kind of sick joke. But as he read letter after letter, examined photo after photo, the truth became undeniable. His wife was having an affair, and it seemed she might be planning something far worse. He stumbled to the bed, collapsing onto the edge. His mind raced, trying to make sense of it all. How long had this been going on? Who was this A? And what exactly did they mean by dealing with E permanently? Ethan's first instinct was to confront Olivia immediately, but a small, rational part of his brain held him back. If she truly was planning something sinister, tipping his hand could be dangerous. He needed advice. He needed support. He needed Marcus. Fumbling for his phone, Ethan dialed his best friend and fellow teacher. Marcus picked up on the 3rd ring. "Hey man, what's up?" Ethan's voice cracked as he spoke. "Marcus, I need you. Can we meet?" The rusty nail. As soon as possible. There must have been something in his tone, because Marcus didn't hesitate. "I'm on my way. Hang tight, buddy." 30 minutes later, Ethan sat across from Marcus in a dimly lit booth at the Rusty Nail. The bar was mercifully quiet for a Saturday afternoon. Ethan's hands trembled as he pushed the shoebox across the table. "I found this while cleaning out the closet," he said, voice barely above a whisper. "You're not going to believe what's inside." Marcus raised an eyebrow but said nothing as he began examining the contents. Ethan watched his friend's expression shift from curiosity to shock to outright anger. "Jesus Christ, Ethan," Marcus breathed. I don't even know what to say." "Tell me I'm crazy," Ethan pleaded. "Tell me there's some innocent explanation for all of this." Marcus shook his head. "I wish I could, man, but this looks pretty damn incriminating." They spent the next hour poring over every scrap of evidence. The love letters were explicit, leaving no doubt about the nature of the relationship. The photos showed Olivia in various intimate settings with a tall, dark-haired man Ethan didn't recognize. "Wait a second," Ethan said, squinting at one particular image. "I know this guy. That's Dr. Adrian Blackwood. He works with Olivia at Evergreen General." Marcus whistled low. "Well, that certainly complicates things. You think this medical conference is just a cover?" Ethan nodded miserably. "Has to be. God, how could I have been so blind?" "Hey, don't beat yourself up," Marcus said, reaching across the table to grip Ethan's shoulder. "You trusted your wife. That's not a crime." No, but what they're planning might be, Ethan replied, gesturing to the ominous note. What the hell am I supposed to do now? Marcus thought for a moment. We need more information. Concrete evidence. Have you considered hiring a private investigator? Ethan blinked. The thought hadn't even occurred to him. You really think that's necessary? Look, man, I hate to say it, but if half of what's in this box is true, you need to protect yourself, both legally and, well, physically. The gravity of the situation hit Ethan anew. His wife, the woman he loved and trusted for years, might actually be planning to harm him. The room seemed to spin. This can't be happening, he muttered, on top of everything else. Marcus leaned forward. What do you mean? Ethan sighed heavily. I got passed over for department head last week. Again. I thought things couldn't get any worse, but this. He gestured helplessly at the damning evidence spread before them. Shit, I'm sorry, Marcus said. Why didn't you tell me about the job? Ethan shrugged. Didn't want to burden you with my problems. Fat lot of good that did me. They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of Ethan's predicament hanging heavy between them. Finally, Marcus spoke. Okay, here's what we're going to do. First, we find a good PI. Get some hard evidence of what Olivia and this Adrian guy are up to. In the meantime, you act completely normal at home. Don't give her any reason to suspect you know. Ethan nodded, grateful for his friend's clear-headed thinking. And then what? Then we figure out exactly what they're planning and how to stop it, Marcus said firmly. But one step at a time, all right? We've got your back, man. For the first time since discovering the shoebox, Ethan felt a glimmer of hope. He wasn't alone in this. With Marcus's help, maybe he could unravel this nightmare and come out the other side. As they left the bar, Ethan's resolve solidified. He would get to the bottom of Olivia's deception, and whatever she and Adrian were planning, he'd be ready. Little did Ethan know, the rabbit hole went far deeper than he could have imagined. The following Monday, Ethan found himself sitting across from Veronica Sloan, a private investigator with a reputation for discretion and results. Marcus had done some quick research and set up the meeting, insisting that time was of the essence. Veronica listened intently as Ethan laid out the situation, her sharp eyes taking in every detail. When he finished, she leaned back in her chair, fingers steepled beneath her chin. Mr. Hawthorne, I won't sugarcoat this. What you're describing is serious. If your suspicions are correct, we're dealing with infidelity at best, and potentially much worse. Ethan swallowed hard. How quickly can you get me proof? Give me a week, Veronica said. I'll need access to your home when your wife is out, and any passwords or account information you can provide. The more I have to work with, the faster I can get results. Ethan nodded, scribbling down everything she asked for. As he handed over the information, a wave of guilt washed over him. This felt like a betrayal. But then he remembered the contents of that shoebox and steeled himself. Olivia had betrayed him first. True to her word, Veronica delivered results within days. The stack of evidence she presented made Ethan's stomach churn. I'm sorry, Mr. Hawthorne, but your suspicions were correct, Veronica said, her voice gentle but firm. Your wife is indeed having an affair with Dr. Adrian Blackwood, but that's not all we uncovered. Ethan braced himself. What else? Veronica spread out a series of financial documents. It appears that Dr. Blackwood and your wife have been embezzling funds from the hospital's charitable foundation. We're talking significant sums of money here. Ethan's head spun. This was so much worse than he'd imagined. How? How long has this been going on? Based on the records we've found, at least 6 months, possibly longer. Veronica hesitated before continuing. There's more, Mr. Hawthorne, and I'm afraid it's not good news. She pulled out bank statements and retirement account information. Ethan's eyes widened as he saw the drastically reduced balances. Your wife has been systematically draining your joint savings and retirement funds, Veronica explained. The money's been funneled into offshore accounts we haven't been able to trace yet. Ethan felt like he'd been punched in the gut. Not only was Olivia cheating on him, but she was stealing from him too? How could he have been so blind? As if reading his thoughts, Veronica continued, Mr. Hawthorne, I've seen cases like this before. It's not uncommon for the victim to blame themselves. But I want you to understand something. Your wife has been gaslighting you for months. Gaslighting? Ethan echoed, the term vaguely familiar. Veronica nodded. It's a form of psychological manipulation. She's been making you doubt your own memory and judgment. Those times you felt confused or thought you were losing track of things. It was deliberate. Memories flooded back. Olivia insisting he'd agreed to plans he didn't remember making. Important documents going missing, only to turn up in places he swore he'd already checked. The constant feeling that he was losing his grip. "Oh, God," Ethan whispered, putting his head in his hands. Veronica gave him a moment to process before speaking again. "Mr. Hawthorne, I know this is overwhelming, but right now, you need to focus on protecting yourself, both legally and financially." Ethan looked up, a newfound determination in his eyes. "You're right. What do I need to do?" "First, we need to secure any remaining assets," Veronica said. "Then, we start building a case. Every bit of evidence, every inconsistency in their stories, it all matters." As Veronica outlined their next steps, Ethan felt a strange mix of emotions. Grief for the life he thought he had. Rage at Olivia's betrayal. But beneath it all, a spark of something he hadn't felt in months. Hope. He would expose the truth. He would reclaim his life. And he would make damn sure Olivia and Adrian paid for what they'd done. As Ethan left Veronica's office, his mind raced with everything he'd learned. The weight of it all threatened to crush him, but he forced himself to focus. He had work to do. First stop, the bank. He needed to freeze any accounts Olivia hadn't already drained and set up new ones in his name only. As he drove, he rehearsed what he'd say. A half-truth about identity theft concerns should do the trick without raising too many red flags. Next, he'd need to gather every important document he could find. Birth certificate, social security card, car titles. Anything Olivia might try to use against him. He made a mental note to rent a safety deposit box to store it all. As he pulled into the bank parking lot, his phone buzzed. A text from Olivia. "Working late tonight. Don't wait up. XO." Ethan's jaw clenched. How many times had he received messages like this? Never suspecting the truth. He took a deep breath, forcing his features into a neutral expression before responding. "No problem. Have a good night. Keep it simple. Act normal. Don't give anything away." As he walked into the bank, Ethan's mind drifted to the mountain of questions still unanswered. How deep did this embezzlement scheme go? Were there other victims besides the hospital and himself? And most pressingly, what exactly were Olivia and Adrian planning to do to him? The chilling phrase from that handwritten note echoed in his mind. Deal with E permanently. A cold sweat broke out on the back of his neck. He needed answers and fast. But for now, he had to focus on the task at hand. One step at a time. As he approached the teller's window, Ethan straightened his shoulders and plastered on his best concerned citizen face. Time to start taking back control of his life. Little did he know, the worst was yet to come. Ethan Hawthorne stood in the garage, his hand shaking slightly as he examined the small GPS tracker. It was barely larger than a quarter, innocuous enough to go unnoticed. He took a deep breath, steeling himself for what he was about to do. The past week had been a blur of covert actions and sleepless nights. After his meeting with Veronica Sloan, Ethan had thrown himself into gathering evidence. He'd ordered hidden cameras and GPS trackers, watching tutorial videos late into the night to ensure he installed them correctly. Now, as the first rays of dawn crept through the garage windows, Ethan prepared to take his surveillance to the next level. He slipped out to Olivia's car, carefully attaching the tracker beneath the rear bumper. His heart raced, half expecting Olivia to burst out of the house at any moment. But the morning remained quiet. Ethan retreated inside, heading straight for his laptop. He pulled up a fake Facebook profile he'd created under the name Alex Thompson. It was bare bones for now, just enough to pass a cursory inspection. He typed Adrian Blackwood into the search bar, his jaw clenching as the doctor's smug face appeared on the screen. Ethan spent the next hour combing through Adrian's public posts, making notes of any potentially useful information. Favorite restaurants, hobbies, mutual friends with Olivia. Anything that might help him understand their relationship better. As he worked, a notification pinged on his phone. The GPS tracker was active. A map showed Olivia's car heading towards the hospital. Ethan's stomach churned. Was she really going to work or meeting Adrian somewhere? He shook his head, forcing himself to focus. He couldn't let paranoia cloud his judgment. He needed hard evidence, not just suspicions. Over the next few days, Ethan fell into a routine. He'd wake up early, check the GPS logs, and review any overnight footage from the hidden cameras. Then he'd head to work, struggling to maintain a facade of normalcy while his mind raced with new information and theories. It was on a Wednesday afternoon that Ethan's careful observation finally paid off. He was grading papers in the living room, half listening to Olivia's phone conversation in the kitchen. She thought he was engrossed in his work, but every sense was attuned to her words. "Yes, everything's set," Olivia said in a low voice. "We'll transfer the last batch of funds next week. Then we can move forward with the plan for Ethan." Ethan's blood ran cold. He forced himself to keep writing, pen moving mechanically across the page. "Don't worry," Olivia continued. "He doesn't suspect a thing. Once we frame him for the embezzlement, it'll be easy to handle the rest." The implications of her words hit Ethan like a physical blow. They weren't just planning to steal from him. They wanted him out of the picture entirely. As soon as Olivia ended the call, Ethan excused himself to the bathroom. He splashed cold water on his face, trying to quell the panic rising in his chest. This was no longer just about infidelity or financial crimes. His life was in danger. He needed help, legal help. With shaking hands, Ethan pulled out his phone and dialed a number he hadn't used in years. Samantha Torres speaking. "Sam, it's Ethan. Ethan Hawthorne. I need your help." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Ethan? My God, it's been ages. What's going on?" "I can't explain everything over the phone," Ethan said, lowering his voice. "But I'm in trouble. Serious trouble. Can we meet?" Something in his tone must have conveyed the urgency of the situation. "Of course," Samantha replied without hesitation. "My office. Tomorrow at 2 p.m. Do you need the address?" Ethan let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. "No, I'll find it. Thank you, Sam. Really." As he ended the call, Ethan felt a glimmer of hope. Samantha had always been the sharpest legal mind in their college circle. If anyone could help him navigate this nightmare, it was her. The next day, Ethan sat across from Samantha in her sleek downtown office, pouring out the whole sordid tale. To her credit, Samantha listened without interruption, her expression growing increasingly grave. When Ethan finished, Samantha leaned back in her chair, fingers steepled beneath her chin. "Ethan, I won't sugarcoat this. You're in a very precarious position, but the fact that you've gathered so much evidence already is going to work in your favor." "So, what do we do?" Ethan asked, his voice hoarse from talking. Samantha's eyes glinted with determination. "We build an ironclad case. Every scrap of evidence, every inconsistency in their stories, every financial transaction, it all goes into a dossier. We need to be ready to move at a moment's notice." For the next several hours, they pored over the evidence Ethan had collected, organizing it into a coherent narrative. Samantha's legal expertise helped identify key points that would be crucial in both criminal and civil proceedings. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the office, Samantha fixed Ethan with a serious look. "There's one more thing we need to discuss, Ethan. Your safety." Ethan nodded. "I've been thinking about that too. If they're willing to frame me for embezzlement, who knows what else they might try." "Exactly," Samantha said. "I want you to start keeping a detailed log of your movements. Anytime you leave the house, text me your destination. And if anything feels off, anything at all, you call me immediately. Got it, got it, Ethan replied, feeling both reassured and terrified by the precautions. As he left Samantha's office, dossier tucked securely in his briefcase, Ethan felt a strange mix of emotions. Fear, certainly, anger at Olivia's betrayal, but also a growing sense of resolve. He would not be a victim. He would fight back, armed with the truth and the law. Little did he know, the battle was far from over. In fact, it was about to get much, much worse. The following weeks were a masterclass in compartmentalization for Ethan. By day, he taught his history classes, discussed homework assignments, and attended faculty meetings. But his mind was never far from the web of deceit he was untangling at home. The strain began to show. Dark circles appeared under his eyes. His normally pristine lesson plans became disorganized, and more than once he found himself staring blankly at his students, lost in thought about his next move against Olivia and Adrian. It was Daryl Washington who finally confronted him about it. The two had been friends since Ethan started at the school, sharing a love for obscure historical trivia and terrible dad jokes. "All right, spill it," Daryl said one afternoon, cornering Ethan in the empty teacher's lounge. "What's going on with you, man? You look like you haven't slept in weeks." Ethan opened his mouth to deflect, but the concern in Daryl's eyes broke through his defenses. Before he knew it, the whole story came pouring out. The affair, the embezzlement, the threats to his life. By the time he finished, Daryl looked as shell-shocked as Ethan felt. "Jesus Christ," Daryl breathed. "I had no idea. Ethan, why didn't you say something sooner?" Ethan shrugged helplessly. "I didn't want to drag anyone else into this mess. It's bad enough that I'm living it." Daryl shook his head firmly. "That's not how friendship works, buddy. You don't have to go through this alone." He paused, considering. "Look, I can't fix this for you, but I can help cover for you here at school. If you need to duck out for a meeting with your lawyer or whatever, just say the word. I've got your back." For the first time in weeks, Ethan felt a weight lift from his shoulders. "Thanks, Daryl. That means a lot." With Daryl's support at work, Ethan was able to focus more energy on building his case. He spent hours each night combing through financial records, cross-referencing dates and transactions. The scope of Olivia and Adrian's embezzlement scheme was staggering. It wasn't just the hospital's charitable foundation they'd been stealing from. The fraud extended to several affiliated clinics and even patient accounts. One night, as Olivia slept soundly upstairs, Ethan made a breakthrough. He'd managed to access a laptop while she was in the shower, quickly copying files onto a hidden flash drive. Now, poring over the documents, he uncovered the full extent of their plan. They'd been siphoning money from multiple sources, laundering it through a series of shell companies before funneling it into offshore accounts. The amounts were astronomical. Millions of dollars that should have gone to patient care and medical research, now lining the pockets of two greedy conspirators. Ethan's hands shook as he compiled his findings. This wasn't just about him anymore. There were dozens, maybe hundreds of victims. Patients who'd been overcharged, employees whose pensions had been raided, charities deprived of crucial funding. He knew he had to do something, but going to the police now might tip off Olivia and Adrian before he had all the evidence he needed to ensure their conviction. No! He needed a subtler approach. After agonizing over the decision, Ethan composed an anonymous email to the hospital's compliance officer. He outlined his suspicions about financial irregularities in the charitable foundation, providing just enough detail to spark an internal investigation without revealing the full scope of what he knew. As he hit send, Ethan felt a mix of relief and trepidation. The wheels were in motion now. There was no going back. The next morning, Ethan woke to the sound of Olivia's phone ringing. He feigned sleep as she answered, his ears straining to catch her side of the conversation. "What do you mean an audit?" Olivia hissed, her voice tight with barely contained panic. "Who authorized that?" Ethan's heart raced. His anonymous tip had worked faster than he'd anticipated. No, Don't do anything yet, Olivia continued. We need to be careful. I'll talk to Adrian and we'll figure out our next move. As soon as Olivia left for work, Ethan sprang into action. He knew time was running out. If Olivia and Adrian realized how much he knew, they might accelerate their plans against him. He spent the morning making copies of all his evidence, storing backups in secure locations. Then, steeling himself, he made a series of anonymous calls to some of the victims he'd identified in his investigation. He couldn't reveal everything, but he urged them to come forward to the authorities with any suspicions about financial mismanagement at the hospital. By the time evening rolled around, Ethan was exhausted but satisfied. The net was closing in on Olivia and Adrian, but he knew the most dangerous part was yet to come. As if on cue, Olivia breezed into the house, a forced cheeriness in her voice. "Honey, I'm home, and I've got a surprise for you." Ethan's guard immediately went up. "Oh, what's that?" Olivia's smile was brittle as she handed him a brochure. "I've booked us a little getaway for our anniversary next month. A lovely cabin in the mountains. Just the two of us, no distractions. What do you think?" Ethan's blood ran cold as he examined the brochure. This had to be it, the accident they'd been planning for him. His mind raced, trying to formulate a response that wouldn't give away his knowledge. "Wow, that's unexpected," he managed, forcing a smile. "It looks great, honey. Thanks for setting this up." Olivia beamed, but Ethan could see the calculation behind her eyes. "I'm so glad you like it. I thought we could use some time to reconnect, you know?" As Olivia chattered on about the amenities at the cabin, Ethan's mind whirled. He needed to find out more details about this trip without arousing suspicion, and he needed a failsafe in case things went wrong. Later that night, as Olivia slept, Ethan composed a timed email to Samantha. In it, he detailed everything he knew about Olivia and Adrian's crimes, including his suspicions about their plans for him on the upcoming trip. He set it to send automatically if he didn't check in within 24 hours of their scheduled return date. It felt morbid, writing what amounted to a dead man's switch. But Ethan knew he had to be prepared for every eventuality. He wouldn't let Olivia and Adrian get away with their crimes, even if the worst should happen to him. As he closed his laptop, a steely resolve settled over Ethan. He'd been reactive for too long, always one step behind Olivia and Adrian's machinations. It was time to take control of the situation. Tomorrow, he decided, he would start subtly manipulating Olivia into revealing more about their upcoming getaway. He'd use every scrap of information to bolster his counterplan, and when the time came, he'd be ready. The night before their anniversary trip, Ethan sat in the darkened living room, a tumbler of whiskey untouched on the coffee table before him. The house was quiet, save for the soft hum of the air conditioning and the occasional creak of settling wood. Upstairs, Olivia slept peacefully, unaware that her carefully constructed world was about to come crashing down around her. Ethan's fingers drummed a restless rhythm on the arm of his chair as he waited. He'd made sure Olivia's wine at dinner was a little stronger than usual, ensuring she'd turn in early. Now, with the clock ticking closer to midnight, he steeled himself for what was to come. His phone buzzed softly. A text from Samantha. "Everything's in place." "You're sure about this?" Ethan's jaw clenched as he typed his response. "No choice. It has to be tonight." He pocketed the phone and stood, moving silently through the house he'd once considered a sanctuary. Now it felt like a tomb, filled with the ghosts of broken promises and shattered trust. In the master bedroom, Olivia stirred as Ethan flicked on the lights. She blinked groggily, confusion giving way to alarm as she registered the hard set of his features. "Ethan? What's going on?" she mumbled, sitting up. "We need to talk, Olivia," Ethan said, his voice cold and steady. "About your affair with Adrian, about the money you've been stealing, about your plans to kill me." Olivia's eyes widened, a flicker of panic quickly masked by indignation. "What are you talking about? Have you lost your mind?" Ethan almost laughed at the irony. How many times had she used that exact phrase to make him doubt himself? But not this time. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a stack of photos, tossing them onto the bed. "Recognize these?" he asked as Olivia's face drained of color. "Or how about this?" He played a recording on his phone, Olivia's own voice discussing embezzled funds with Adrian. That's not what it sounds like," Olivia stammered, her eyes darting around the room as if searching for an escape route. "Save it," Ethan snapped. "I know everything, Olivia. Every lie, every stolen dollar. Every plan you and Adrian cooked up, including your little scheme for our anniversary trip." Olivia's composure cracked. Tears welled in her eyes as she launched into a frantic denial. "Ethan, please, you don't understand. It's not what you think. Adrian and I, we were just what?" Ethan interrupted, his voice rising. "Just stealing millions from sick people? Just planning to frame me for your crimes? Just plotting to murder me?" The weight of evidence was overwhelming. As Ethan laid out detail after damning detail, Olivia's denials grew weaker. Finally, faced with irrefutable proof of her misdeeds, she crumbled. "I'm sorry," she sobbed, burying her face in her hands. "I'm so sorry, Ethan. I never meant for it to go this far. Adrian, he said it would be easy, that no one would get hurt." Ethan felt a twinge of pity, quickly swallowed by a wave of disgust. "No one would get hurt? What about the patients whose care suffered because of your greed? What about our marriage? What about me? Olivia, you were going to kill me." Olivia's head snapped up, a calculating gleam replacing the tears in her eyes. "Kill you? Don't be ridiculous. I love you, Ethan. This is all just a big misunderstanding. We can work through this, can't we? For better or worse, remember?" Ethan watched as Olivia cycled through tactics. Pleading for forgiveness gave way to threats of ruining his reputation. When that failed to sway him, she tried to shift blame, painting herself as Adrian's unwitting victim. But Ethan stood firm, unmoved by her manipulations. "It's over, Olivia. I've already given copies of everything to the police and the hospital board. They're expecting my statement first thing in the morning." Olivia's face contorted with rage. "You bastard! Do you have any idea what you've done? I'll destroy you for this. I swear to God." "No, you won't," Ethan said calmly, holding up his phone. "Because I've been recording this entire conversation. One more piece of evidence to add to the pile." All fight drained from Olivia then. She slumped back against the headboard, defeated. "What happens now?" she asked in a small voice. "Now I'm leaving," Ethan replied. "I'm filing for divorce, and I'll be testifying against you and Adrian in court. What happens to you after that is up to the justice system." He turned to go, pausing at the doorway to look back at the woman he'd once loved more than life itself. She seemed small and pathetic now, a far cry from the confident, caring partner he'd thought he married. "Goodbye, Olivia," he said softly. Then he walked out, leaving her alone with the ruins of her carefully constructed web of lies. As Ethan's car pulled away from the house, he felt a curious mix of emotions. Relief, certainly. Anger still simmered beneath the surface. But mostly he felt lighter, as if he'd set down a burden he hadn't even realized he'd been carrying. He checked his phone, seeing a flurry of messages from Samantha. "It's done," he texted back. "Meeting the board at 9 a.m. See you there." The next morning dawned bright and clear, at odds with the storm of emotions roiling inside Ethan. He straightened his tie, took a deep breath, and pushed open the doors to the hospital's main conference room. Inside, a grim-faced group awaited him. The hospital board sat at one end of the long table, their expressions a mix of shock, anger, and disbelief. At the other end, a pair of stone-faced detectives conferred in low voices. Samantha rose to greet him, squeezing his arm in silent support. "Ready?" she murmured. Ethan nodded, setting his briefcase on the table. "As I'll ever be." For the next 3 hours, Ethan laid out his case. He presented financial records, surveillance footage, recorded conversations, a mountain of evidence that left no doubt about Olivia and Adrian's guilt. The board members' expressions shifted from skepticism to horror as the full scope of the embezzlement scheme became clear. Millions of dollars, siphoned away from patient care, research funding, and employee pensions. "My God," breathed Dr. Eleanor Patel, the board's chairwoman. "How did we miss this?" "They were clever," Ethan explained. "Used a network of shell companies, falsified records. But once you know what to look for," he spread his hands, indicating the damning evidence before them. As the meeting wound down, Dr. Patel stood, her face etched with determination. "Mr. Hawthorne, on behalf of the board, I want to thank you for bringing this to our attention. Rest assured, we will be taking immediate action. Dr. Blackwood and Mrs. Hawthorne are suspended, effective immediately, pending a full investigation." The detectives approached next, peppering Ethan with questions about his evidence and methods. He answered as best he could, acutely aware of the fine line he'd walked in gathering some of his proof. Finally, as the room began to clear, Samantha pulled Ethan aside. "You did good in there," she said softly. "But this is just the beginning. Are you ready for what comes next?" Ethan exhaled slowly, feeling the weight of the past few months pressing down on him. "I have to be," he replied. "For all the people they hurt. For myself." Samantha nodded, a spark of admiration in her eyes. "Well, you won't be doing it alone. I've been thinking we should set up some kind of support system for the other victims. Legal aid, counseling, that sort of thing. What do you say?" A small smile tugged at Ethan's lips. "I say let's get to work." The following weeks were a whirlwind of activity. Ethan and Samantha threw themselves into organizing support for the victims of Olivia and Adrian's fraud. They set up a hotline, arranged pro bono legal consultations, and coordinated with therapists willing to offer discounted services. But it wasn't all smooth sailing. As news of the scandal broke, Ethan found himself besieged by reporters hungry for details. Worse were the calls and messages from Olivia's family and friends, alternating between pleas for him to drop the charges and vicious attacks on his character. "You never deserved her anyway," Olivia's sister snarled in one particularly nasty voicemail. "She was too good for you. You'll regret this. You backstabbing piece of shit." Ethan deleted the message with a weary sigh. He'd expected backlash, but the relentless nature of it was wearing him down. "You okay?" Samantha asked, noticing his furrowed brow as they pored over case files one evening. Ethan managed a wan smile. "Just tired. Sometimes I wonder if it's all worth it, you know?" Samantha's eyes flashed with determination. "It is. Think of all the people you're helping, the lives you're putting back together. That's worth everything." Her words bolstered Ethan's resolve. He threw himself back into their work with renewed vigor, focusing on the good they were doing rather than the negativity swirling around him. Slowly but surely, progress was made. The support group grew, with victims finding solace and strength in shared experiences. The legal team, spearheaded by Samantha, began building a rock-solid case against Olivia and Adrian. And through it all, Ethan found himself growing. The betrayal and pain were still there, a dull ache in his chest. But alongside it bloomed something new, a sense of purpose, of righteous anger channeled into positive action. He began to rediscover parts of himself he'd thought long lost. The passionate teacher, temporarily buried under the weight of suspicion and fear, reemerged. His students noticed a change, responding with increased engagement and enthusiasm. One afternoon, as Ethan wrapped up a particularly lively discussion on the civil rights movement, he caught Daryl grinning at him from the doorway. "What?" Ethan asked as the last student filed out. Daryl shook his head, still smiling. "Nothing, man. It's just good to see the old Ethan back, you know?" Ethan felt a warmth spread through his chest. "Yeah," he replied softly. "It's good to be back." As the months wore on and the case against Olivia and Adrian built, Ethan found himself settling into a new normal. The pain of betrayal gradually dulled, replaced by a steely determination to see justice done. Finally, 6 months after that fateful night of confrontation, the trial began. Ethan sat ramrod straight in the witness box, his voice steady as he recounted the sordid details of Olivia and Adrian's crimes. He could feel their eyes boring into him from the defense table, but he refused to look their way. Instead, he focused on the jury, on the victims filling the gallery behind them. With each piece of evidence presented, each damning fact laid bare, Ethan saw a weight lift from their shoulders. This was why he'd fought so hard. This was what made it all worthwhile. As he stepped down from the stand, Ethan caught Samantha's eye. She gave him a small nod, a gesture packed with pride and solidarity. In that moment, Ethan realized something had shifted between them. The long hours working side by side, the shared mission of justice. It had forged a connection deeper than mere friendship. The trial stretched on for weeks, a painstaking unraveling of Olivia and Adrian's web of deceit. But in the end, justice prevailed. The jury returned a guilty verdict on all counts, and the judge's sentence was appropriately severe. As Olivia was led away in handcuffs, she locked eyes with Ethan one last time. Ethan felt a chapter of his life closing, but rather than sadness, he felt only relief and a burgeoning sense of possibility. In the weeks that followed, life took on a brighter hue. The school board, impressed by Ethan's integrity and perseverance throughout the ordeal, offered him the long-coveted position of department head. He accepted with a mixture of pride and humility, vowing to use the role to inspire his students as he'd been inspired by the pursuit of justice. But Ethan's ambitions didn't stop there. Using a portion of the recovered funds awarded to him in the civil suit, he established a foundation dedicated to supporting victims of financial fraud and domestic deception. The work was challenging but deeply rewarding, a way to transform his pain into something positive. And through it all, Samantha remained by his side. What had begun as a professional relationship slowly blossomed into something more. They took things slow, both wary of rushing into anything after the turmoil of the past year. But there was no denying the spark between them, the deep understanding forged in the crucible of shared struggle. One evening, as they walked hand in hand to the park near Ethan's new apartment, Samantha turned to him with a soft smile. "You know, when you called me that day, I never imagined we'd end up here," she said. Ethan chuckled, squeezing her hand. "Believe me, neither did I, but I'm glad we did." They paused, watching the sun dip below the horizon, painting the sky in brilliant hues of orange and pink. "What are you thinking?" Samantha asked, noticing the pensive look on Ethan's face. He was quiet for a moment, considering. "I'm thinking about how far I've come," he said finally. "A year ago, I was lost, drowning in lies and betrayal. Now," he gestured expansively, encompassing the park, the foundation, Samantha herself. "Now I feel like I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be." Samantha leaned into him, resting her head on his shoulder. "You're stronger than you know, Ethan Hawthorne. You took something terrible and turned it into a force for good. I'm proud of you, and I'm excited to see what you do next." Ethan wrapped his arm around her, feeling a surge of warmth and hope. The road ahead wasn't clear, but for the first time in a long time, he was eager to see where it might lead. As they turned to head home, Ethan reflected on the journey that had brought him to this point. The pain, the struggle, the moments of despair, they had all shaped him, forged him into someone stronger and wiser than he'd been before. He'd lost much, it was true, but he'd gained so much more. Purpose, self-respect, and a chance at true happiness. Whatever challenges lay ahead, Ethan knew he was ready to face them not alone, but with allies by his side and a newfound strength in his heart. The sun dipped below the horizon, and Ethan Hawthorne stepped forward into his future, ready to write the next chapter of his life. This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comment section. Thanks for your time. If you enjoy this story, please subscribe to this channel. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.
Welcome to Lost Relation Chronicles.
My name is Matthew Weston. I'm 34 years old and have been married for 12 years. One evening, while we were having dinner at the dining table, my wife, Andrea, announced that she was going to take a lover. Without hesitation, I simply said, okay. I'm a highly successful inventor and technical writer, owning a small manufacturing plant. But none of that holds much value to me. Money is just a way to keep score, and I'm not interested in playing the game. Andrea, however, is the opposite. She's a social climber through and through. Every year, she insists on buying a brand new luxury car. We belong to the most expensive country club in town, and we live in a sprawling 20-room McMansion. Andrea decided early on that we wouldn't have children, which was her choice, not mine. While she surrounds herself with luxury, I prefer simpler pleasures. I drive a 6-year-old 4x4 pickup and find joy in my modest lakefront property, a cozy 4-room cottage, a 16-foot pontoon boat, a 12-foot V-hull fishing boat, a 4-seat UTV, and my big, lovable mutt, Junior. Andrea refuses to visit the cottage or even acknowledge Junior. She won't pet him and insists he stay in a kennel in the garage. I noticed everything, of course. I just never thought it was worth making a big fuss about. Like I said, money doesn't excite me. That Friday night, as we sat at the dining table, we were supposed to be getting ready for some charity event at the country club. It was one of those evenings filled with dancing and pretense, the kind Andrea adored. She looked up from her plate and said, Matthew, I want to take a lover. I met her gaze calmly and replied, okay, Andy, I'll have my attorney draw up the divorce papers on Monday. You can have the house, but I won't pay the mortgage. You can keep your car, but there won't be a new one when you want it. I'll give you a $600,000 settlement. That's $50,000 for every year we've been married. But there will be no alimony, and I won't bankroll any more of your spending. From that point on, you'll be completely on your own. Then I leaned back in my chair and waited for her response. To say she was shocked would be accurate. She sputtered. Aren't you even going to fight or ask why? She then said, I didn't say anything about divorce. I love you. Wrong, I spit back at her. Andy, if you loved me, we would not be having this discussion in this house, going to that country club, in your fancy car. I indulged you because it made you happy, and I could do it. Now you tell me I am not enough. What am I supposed to say? Is taking a lover a new status symbol, or am I not good enough in the bedroom? Am I not pretty enough for your nose in the air friends? Will your lover be the father of your children when you decide to have them? Were you planning on giving me mercy sex every 3 or 4 weeks like you do now? And no, I am not going to fight it or ask why you want it, so I will indulge you. I just won't be around to watch. Just remember we said, forsaking all others. Andrea got a look on her face, as if she had just let a noisy fart in church. She started to tear up and said, Elaine, said that you would allow it, and I thought because I told you ahead of time, you would agree. I will forget it. Too late. You obviously want this, so go ahead. I care a great deal. I am not happy with it, but you obviously are, so go ahead. Even if you decide you are not going to do it, I am still talking to the lawyer on Monday. You obviously do not care for our marriage, and I suspect that you haven't for a long time. So go ahead and get your sex buddy, or have you already picked one out? I was on a roll now. Does Charles know that Elaine has a lover, or will my telling him be a surprise? Just so you know, I put the company and all of our non-personal monies into a temporary trust fund, and I am going to begin drawing a salary of $60,000 a year. Because you refuse to accept any part of the company ownership, when you get your own attorney, you will find that you cannot touch any of it. I don't want a divorce, she wailed. Why are you doing this to me? Because you did this to us, I screamed. Now if you are going to the dance tonight, you better hurry and get ready. While you are there, I'll pack up most of my stuff and we'll be gone when you get back. I just ask that until I file for the divorce, you don't bring your lover to our bed. I don't want a divorce, she screamed. And what do you mean when you said if I am going to the dance? You are going, it's your favorite charity, you are on their board of directors, and you paid for the tickets. Besides, every one of our friends will be there. She then sobbed. Please don't do this, this was all a mistake. And please don't say anything to Charles, it will hurt Elaine. You are really striking out on your ideas tonight. You must want a divorce. You want someone else other than me in your bed. It is not my favorite charity, it's yours. They voted me to the board of directors because you lobbied for it. I have never attended even one meeting. Did I pay for the tickets? You signed the charge card slip. They're your friends, not mine. My friends will have nothing to do with you. You treat them like they were a pile of dog crap you stepped in and can't get off your shoe. I then continued, hurt Elaine. What about Elaine's husband? What about Elaine's kids? Andy, do you even know where I go on Tuesday nights when I say I am going with my buddies? We go, heaven forbid, bowling. We drink beer. Horrors. Some of us even swear and yell and sometimes even fart. Oh no. Andrea was getting angry, and she practically screamed. I could care less what you and your low-life buddies do on Tuesday. We are going to this dance. We are going to smile and make nice. You are going to write a big check, and we are going to drop this lover idea. Do you understand? I got up from the table after I finished my dinner and went upstairs. Andrea was in the bathroom getting ready for the dance. She said, I laid out your tuxedo and your dancing shoes. I went into the closet and grabbed my army barracks and duffel bags left over from my service time and tossed them on the bed on top of the tux. I opened the wardrobe cupboard that had my casual clothes in it and started stuffing my blue jeans, flannel shirts, underwear, and other stuff that I wanted when I left. Andrea came out of the bathroom and saw what I was doing and screamed, Get that stuff off the tux, you will wrinkle it. At the dance, you have to look your best. Wrong again, Andy, I said. I do not have to look my best. Junior doesn't care, and the cottage doesn't care, and I don't care. I am not going to the dance tonight. Also, after tonight, I will only talk to you through or in the presence of my lawyer. Have a good time tonight, and tell Charles the First I'm sorry about Elaine. By the way, does Elaine know that Charles bowls? With that, I continued packing. When the duffel was full, I took it out to the truck. I went back in and saw Andrea sitting at the dining room twirling her wedding set around her finger. I stopped, walked up to the table, and took my wedding ring off and put it in front of her. She just started crying. I did not want this place, this car, the country club. All I wanted was to have a loving wife, a loving family, and be a good provider. At least I got the good provider right. You can contact me through the company email while I am staying at the cottage. There is no phone or internet up there. Of course, you would not know about that as you never have been there. Even though I have asked at least 3 times a year since I bought the land and had it built. When I finished, I went back upstairs and continued packing. I put the stuff I would need in the truck, grabbed a travel mug of coffee, let Junior out of the kennel and into the truck and drove away. Of course, that was not the end of the play. I went to the cottage, and Junior was in dog heaven. The cottage included 15 acres of fenced yard. The building also included an airlock entrance with dog doors. After opening the windows, unblocking the dog doors, and turning on the electricity, I sat down in my extremely ratty but comfortable recliner and thought back over what happened today. I could not believe what my wife was thinking. She must have known that I would not put up with the crap she was proposing. She probably just didn't care, because of one of her so-called friends. Charles is as common as dirt and my vice president of sales. Elaine seems to feel that that puts her in the upper crust of society. For some stupid reason, Elaine seems to think that as the owner and her husband's boss, I have not reached that level. She was always putting me down in Andrea's social set. I brought my cell phone with me, even though the last time I was here there was no signal. I plugged it in to charge and saw I had a good but not great signal. I knew they were putting in a tower a few miles down the road. I also had satellite TV installed. Now that I was going to be here a while, I will get satellite internet. I let things settle down and went to sleep with Junior on the floor next to the bed. I woke at about 5:30 a.m. to a ringing phone. It took a minute to realize that it was my cell. It went to voicemail before I could get to it. I laid back down, but it rang again before I got settled down. This time I got to it and listened while a police desk sergeant asked if I was the husband of Andrea Weston, and when I said I was, he asked if I could come to the police station to clear up some things. When I asked if Andrea was hurt, he said no. I then asked if I was going to be questioned about something officially. He said yes, so I said I will be there with my attorney as soon as I can coordinate with him. The sergeant thanked me and said that was fine. I ended the call and the phone rang again before I could even put it down. It was Charles this time. Charles was laughing as he told me that Andrea and Elaine had a knockdown dragout after a drunken screaming match. Elaine and Andrea were both arrested. Andrea is in jail, and Elaine is in the police ward at the Memorial Hospital. Charles said they were screaming about lovers and husbands. The gist of the fight was that Elaine pulled a prank on Andrea. Andrea screamed that Elaine ruined her marriage. Then the fight was on. By the time it was over, both were mostly naked, and Elaine was out cold. Charles asked me if I knew what the two of them were fighting about. I said that Andrea and I had a disagreement and that is why I wasn't there. I said that unless it was about that, I had no idea. I told him about the call from the police. I then said I hope Elaine is going to be okay, and I would talk to him at work tomorrow. I ended the call and damn if it didn't ring again. This time it was Andrea. She was crying and sounded funny. I almost couldn't understand her. I told her that I would be there as soon as I could get hold of my lawyer if she had not already called one. She said that she hadn't thought about that, but my lawyer was fine. She also said she was not sure what she was being charged with, other drunk and disorderly. I told her again that I would be there as soon as I could. I finally got my lawyer, Brian Harper, at his golf course. I explained what was going on. I also explained about the police call, and the fact they want an official questioning. Brian said he would meet me there around 1 p.m. He then warned me to tell Andrea not to say anything and the same for me until he meets us. This time when I ended the call, it did not ring again. I grabbed Junior's food dish and filled it and his water. He seemed disappointed that he was not going along. I mounted up and headed back to town. When I arrived at the station, Brian was there already, and also surprisingly, Charles. He was there with a man I did not know. The stranger turned out to be a cousin of Elaine's who was also a lawyer. We were met by a team of detectives. They asked me and Brian to go with them to an interrogation room. I held up my hand in a stop sign. I asked, "What is my wife being held for, and why am I being treated like a suspect? I am here voluntarily, and if you do not answer those two questions, I am not going anywhere except out the exit. And after you answer those questions, I demand to see my wife." The detective started getting belligerent, but my lawyer stopped him and said, "Those questions are valid, and if you do not answer, I will have a writ of habeas corpus here in 15 minutes or less. If your answers are not satisfactory, I am advising my client to not answer any questions." A captain walked into the lobby just as Brian started his speech and came over to ask if there was any trouble. The detective said no trouble and apologized to me by saying, "I'm sorry, I'm just pissed because it is my son's birthday, and I am missing it with a drunk and disorderly call." The captain then asked the detective if these people were here because of the catfight at the Mirage Country Club last night. He even made air quotes. When the detective said yes, the captain said that everyone can go home as soon as all the damages are paid for. The Mirage said 3 chairs, 2 tables were damaged and 6 customer drinks were spilled, and a few customers needed clothes cleaned or replaced. So far, the total is under $350. The captain said that D&D's first-time offense is a $75 fine or 15 days or both, but because the countercharges of assault and battery were withdrawn, the assistant DA is just giving them a fine. The captain led me to the desk and gave me a bill for half the damages and my wife's fine. I asked for a bill for all the damages and explained that Charles worked for me and didn't need the hassle. I said, knowing Charles, his wife is going to get a very large ration of shit about the fight because Charles saw and heard it all. After I paid, they took me back to see Andrea, and I could not help but take out my cell phone and snap a picture. She had a cut over her right eye, a black and blue bruised cheek and swollen left eye, a swollen lip that looked like a poor plastic surgery attempt, and was dressed in a bright orange jail jumpsuit with a logo in large black letters across the front and back, "Inmate of the city jail." After I stopped taking pictures, the captain said that I could return the jumpsuit when Andrea had more suitable clothes. I thanked him and took Andrea out to my truck. She sort of sniffed, and for some reason that pissed me off to no end. "Get in the truck, or you are walking. We are not done with this whole weekend fiasco. I can't use Brian now, but I am still going to find a divorce attorney." Andrea started sniffling and got in the truck. She still acted like she was afraid she might catch some deadly disease from casual contact with any part of the truck, but I just let it go. After we were buckled in, I drove back to the house. I told Andrea to go in and change and bring the jumpsuit back to me. She asked, "Aren't you coming in?" I said, "It's not my house anymore, and I don't think I ever want to go into that place again. I have to get the rest of the stuff I am taking, but I don't want you there when I do. If I take something that you want, our lawyers can negotiate for it. Now go change. I need to get back to Junior and the cottage." She screamed at me, "You think more of that goddamn dog than you do of me." "Yes, I do. Junior does not want to take a lover, and he also likes the cottage. That put him 2 points ahead of you right now. So quit while you're behind." I sighed and continued, "Andy, you used to enjoy the things I do. You like to fish, spend time at the lake, even get in that first ratty boat I had. You even seemed to like to bowl. Hell, I remember you even played touch football with all of the people at the plant. I also remember you were a good softball player. Was it the money that made my loving and fun wife into a social climbing shrew? You're saying you were going to take a lover was just the straw that broke the camel's back. I had thought of talking to you about a divorce or at least a separation. If it is the money, I will give you a check for $5 million tomorrow if you will sign the divorce papers. That way you can continue your social climbing. Otherwise, change into some ratty jeans, sneakers, and a flannel shirt and come with me to the cottage. Understand this is your last chance. I am canceling the country club, resigning for all of the stupid charities, and losing the opera tickets. If you come out of the house and get in the truck, we may have a chance. If you refuse, I will write the check, and after the divorce is final, you will never see me again. I did not tell you, because you never seemed interested, but I am negotiating the transfer of the company to the employees. I will still hold the patents and consult when needed, but I need a new challenge, and making more money is not it. I was thinking of finding a large piece of property and starting an experimental non-profit wind farm, to see if there are more efficient alternatives to current wind tech levels. I am also using some money to support a young researcher in a water desalination project that will make fresh water available to many of the poorest countries on the planet. He is looking for low-cost, energy-efficient ways to make drinkable water from the sea. He is also working on finding ways to clean up the water in countries that have a safe water problem. Even with all of that, the check I will write for you will no even remove a zero from the end of my available funds. You knew we were rich, just not how rich. Her mouth was open and her good eye was the size of a saucer when I finished that speech. She said, "Please give me 15 minutes to pack." I responded laughing. That would be a miracle. 1 pair of jeans, 1 set of underwear, 1 shirt, 1 pair of socks, 2 pair of comfy shoes, not heels, because tomorrow we show up at Walmart for a new wardrobe. Okay, she said, then laughed and asked if she could take a purse and some makeup. Yes, to the purse, no to the makeup. When you're not beat up, you don't need it. And you may want to take some warm pajamas because the cabin gets cool in the night. She was back out of the house in about 10 minutes and even had what looked like a smile, hard to tell with her fat lip. I teased her as we were headed back to the police station. I said she looked like she went 3 rounds with Tommy Hearns. She playfully punched me in the arm and then began to tell me about her adventure. I was devastated when you left. Elaine, my ex-friend, said you would be okay with it and it sounded very exciting. She also said that it was becoming fairly common in our social set. Like an idiot, I believed her. After you left, I realized something wasn't right, so I called a cab and went to the country club for the dance and some answers. Elaine and Charles were there, and so were a lot of my other friends. I mentioned to Lori Swain that I had told you I was taking a lover, and Lori got a funny, disgusted look on her face and said, "I'll bet Elaine put you up to that. She has tried it on all of us, and so far you're the only idiot stupid and naive enough to start doing it." I'll bet Matthew was really happy to hear that. I then proceeded to get totally drunk and went over and confronted Elaine. She just laughed and said, "If you were stupid enough to believe that, I will sell you a beach house in Taos, New Mexico." Well, I picked up one of the centerpieces and threw the water and flowers at her and screamed that she ruined my marriage. She grabbed me by the hair and the fight was on. She hit me pretty good a few times, but I got a good lick into her face and she went down and hit her head on a table and was out cold. The cops showed up and arrested both of us and took me to jail and Elaine to the hospital. At about 5 a.m., they let me make a phone call and I called Charles to apologize. He told me he hadn't had so much fun since the first company outing when you and I got spilled out of the canoe and you had to rescue a panicked me from 18 inches of water. He then told me Elaine had become very mean-spirited recently and he was glad I took her down a peg. He then told me that a cell tower had been installed close to where your cottage is. I tried calling, but it went to voicemail. I then tried again, and that time I got a busy signal. I finally got through, and the rest is a sorry history. She then said, "Matthew, I'm sorry for causing all this trouble. I love you, and I am not even contemplating someone else. I know what I said, and now in hindsight, I see that it was stupid, selfish, and hurtful. Can you forgive me?" "I can't forgive you, but you never did answer the questions I asked about your feelings toward me. I really think that after this has all calmed down, we need to either go to a marriage counselor or get a divorce." I added, "I do not like the new you that you have become. I know everyone changes, but why would you change what used to make you happy?" Andy replied, "I guess I lost sight of what and who was important. I will go to counseling with you. I don't want a divorce. I am also very sorry I have physically neglected you recently. You are a kind and considerate lover, and I don't want to change that. Now that my brain fart is over, I will do everything I can to make it up to you. I'm so sorry it took all this trouble to get my head out of my butt. One other thing. If we go to marriage counseling, I'm going to insist we sell that monstrosity of a house. 2 people do not need a 12-bedroom house. We have never had a guest that stayed over, and people have told me they are not comfortable there. I know that it has never been my home. It has just been a house. Andy, I have not had fun with you for several years. I have used my Tuesday night outings and occasional weekends at the cottage for escapes. I want you as much today as that day when I said I do. I just am tired of everything that is important to your friends is important to you. If you need the house to be happy, if you need a $100,000 car to be happy, if you need the country club to be happy, no, don't need me." I went on. "The cottage is on a small lake. It is very isolated. And while I am at work tomorrow, think about where you want to go from here." I said I forgive you, but I am still hurt that you even thought that I was a chicken enough to allow you to hang cuck horns on me. As I pulled into the access road, a forest ranger was blocking the road. He was a man I had dealt with before. He is a really conscientious, nice guy. "Hi, Greg. Is there a problem?" "No, Mr. Weston. One of the other rangers saw car lights on the access road last night, and we wanted to check it out." Victor took the ATV cross-country and I am blocking the road so whoever it was can't escape. The ranger said. I got very red ears and cheeks as I said, Greg, I came up last night and had so much on my mind I forgot to let the station know it was me. Tell Victor and the others that when I see them off duty next time, I'll buy them a drink. Greg got on the radio and recalled Victor. He then unblocked the access road. Andy asked, what was that all about? I explained. The property that I own and the property surrounding it are locked inside a national forest. This access road was once a fire break trail, and it goes through some real sensitive wildlife habitat. The rangers asked me to let them know when I was either here or coming up because of poachers and pot growers want to get in here. Is there any danger up here? She asked. There is an occasional black bear, but if you don't put the garbage outside, they will not get close to the cottage. I have a composting station that is accessed from the back of the cottage and not accessible to the outside. If you make any organic garbage, it goes in there. I continued. I shot at a bunch of pot growers a year or so back that thought my cottage and the land would be good for their plantings. Rock salt in the butt, and the sound of a shotgun made them think again. They even left the grass plants. Andy laughed at that, then got a very surprised expression on her when the cottage came into view. I told you it is 4 rooms, but the total footprint is only about 350 square feet because the place is built underground into a hillside. The curb view is a look of a log cabin with large expanses of glass. Andy said with some awe in her voice, This is beautiful if the inside is as nice as the front. No wonder you like it here. What is the inside like? I said. You will have to decide for yourself. It is 2 bedrooms, 4 rooms, 3 full baths. The rooms are bigger than average. The kitchen is 20 feet by 10 feet. The multipurpose room is L-shaped with the long side 46 foot and the next long side 28, and the bedrooms are an identical 14 feet by 20 feet, not counting the walk-in closets and ensuite baths. I laughed at her expression. I said it was a cottage. I never said it was shack. I had it built it this way because I knew you like your creature comforts. Too bad you never wanted to see your 5th anniversary present. She started crying. You had this built for me. How could I be so stupid as to hurt you as I did? Marriage counseling seemed to work. We sold the McMansion. I bought a 4-bedroom house on 10 acres in a new development designed for middle-class yuppies that wanted out of the city. Andy was very attentive for about 2 years, but then the attempts at social climbing started again. She had asked if we could join the local Habitat for Humanity on the project they were doing in the city. I said okay, and we went down and signed up. I found that I still like to work with my hands. As we were finishing the 3rd house project we were involved in, one of the officers in the local chapter came up to me and told me Andy had told him about the great work I had done while on the board of the other charity. I just laughed, told the guy not interested, and that he lost a volunteer. I picked up my tools, waved to Andy, watched her smile, and went over to my truck and drove back toward the cottage. I stopped at the house, put my cell phone on the kitchen table, packed all of my ratty clothes, grabbed dog food, all the beer in the fridge, whistled for Junior, and we left. About 12 hours later, Andy drove up in a cab and told me to pay the driver. I laughed. Not happening. 1. I don't have much money. 2. I did not hire him. 3. I am not interested in why you are reverting to your social climbing ways, but I won't stand for it. Now, if you want to get back in that cab and go back to the house that used to be ours, I will give the cab driver all of the money I am carrying and go to an ATM tomorrow. I don't need to hear from you again. I walked over to the cab driver and saw the meter wasn't even turned on. I asked him what he was promised if he brought her here. He told me she said $150 and all for him. I handed him all my cash, about $225, and said I am bringing her back to this cab. You are taking her back to the address I give you, and if I see you or any one of your company cars on my property again, I will not hesitate to shoot out a radiator and radio. Do you understand? He nodded. I told him wait for no more than 15 minutes as I have to have a quick chat with my soon-to-be ex-wife. I grabbed Andy, pulled her into the cottage and said angrily, sit down and do not speak. When I am finished, you are getting in that cab and going back to the house. Do I make myself clear? I went into the kitchen and got my checkbook and wrote her a check for $7 million. This is more than what I promised, but you did stop social climbing for 2 extra years. I would not put that in the bank until tomorrow as I will have to move some funds to cover it. Now I am walking you out to that cab. You are getting in and getting out of my life. Didn't the last a-hole type mistake and the counseling make any impression on you? Now you can climb as high socially as that check will take you. Let's go. I walked her out to the cab, carrying my shotgun, and told the driver don't come back. I did not hear from Andy for almost 6 months, but she never cashed the check. Finally, I was in the city doing another Habitat house. When Andy came up to me and asked if we could talk, I told her to hang on. I then told the foreman and the director guy that I was done for the day and would be back in the morning. I asked Andy, "What is there to talk about? I have told you many times that you had to quit trying to move up in status. That check I gave you should have been status enough." She just said, "I miss you and want to tell you some things that you need to know." I said, "You couldn't have missed me too much. I did not hear the company phone ring when you didn't call. I didn't read the letter that you didn't send me. Or how about coming to the office and asking for an appointment?" I continued, "Oh, that's right. I am the a-hole who wouldn't let his wife take a lover when she told me she was going to. I'm the a-hole who made wifey sell her McMansion after she promised no more social climbing. I even bought in a yuppie community where the house is. I'm the a-hole who had a beautiful cottage built for an anniversary present for my wife. I really don't think that there is anything we need to talk about without divorce lawyers present. I asked you to stay out of my life." Andy had wilted by this time and was silently sobbing. She just turned and walked back to her car, and after a couple of minutes to compose herself, drove off. I contacted a lawyer the next day and started the divorce proceeding. I told him what had transpired and that I just wanted out. I told him she could have the house, the cottage, and $10 million if she just signs the damn papers. I told him all I needed of personal stuff was the dog, my truck, and a 45-day head start before she tried to find me. He said that we were in a no-fault state, so he would need all of my financial records and current holdings. He just about choked when I said, "Okay, she will then get a mortgaged house, nothing of the cottage, and $30,000 as that was my savings." I added that everything else was owned by the trust and was out of her reach. I asked him to make sure he let her know that when she was served. I also said that I did not want and would not accept any direct contact with her. All correspondence was to go through him. He said he would file the papers with both proposals and have her served by the end of the next week. Andy must have gotten the message because she signed the papers. She refused the check, sold the house, and sent me through my lawyer the deed for the cottage. I never have seen or heard from her since. That cottage is sure nice. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.
Today is my younger brother's wedding day, and his fiancée, Emma, has just launched herself at me. Her voice rang out so loud that everyone could hear, cutting through me like a sharp knife. The very thought of my brother's wedding had filled me with joy, but why am I standing here, being humiliated in front of our family? The pain from her words settled deep in my chest and spread through my body. The warm atmosphere of celebration seemed to dim instantly, and a chilly silence filled the room. Was I the only one feeling shaken, or had the guests also started to look at me with judgment? I could feel the weight of their cold stares, as if everyone here silently agreed that I didn't belong. "You shouldn't be coming around here. It's just you don't really belong here, Jane." Emma's sharp eyes made it clear she thought I was a burden. "You have no place here," her gaze seemed to say. I felt the urge to speak up, to defend myself, but every time I tried to find words, they got caught in my throat. Anger, sadness, frustration, they tangled inside me, too overwhelming to sort through. Every breath felt tight, and my legs started to shake. As much as I wanted to deny it, I couldn't help feeling that maybe she was right. Had I depended too much on Kevin? I'd leaned on my younger brother over the years, maybe even without realizing how much of a burden I'd become. It's true that my presence might have been straining their relationship. Then maybe I was the problem. But even if that's true, she didn't have to say it like this. Emma's words had only one purpose: to make sure I knew my place. "I understand," I said. The words came out as if someone else was speaking them. I could barely recognize my own voice. It was quiet, rough, drained. But that was all I could say. I stood up calmly, trying my best to keep it together. I wanted to stay and at least see the ceremony through to the end, but I knew I couldn't stay in this room any longer. The thought of tainting Kevin's happy day with my presence was unbearable. I took a step toward the door, feeling like I was slipping out of my own life. Just as I reached for the door handle, there was a loud crash behind me. I turned and saw that a chair had fallen over. My name is Jane, and I'm 32 years old. I often wonder how different things would have been if that accident hadn't happened. Kevin and I lost our parents when I was 11 and he was just 8. They were coming back from a weekend trip when the accident occurred. By the time we got to the hospital, both of them were gone. It felt like the world had gone silent. I didn't know how to process the reality in front of me. The only clear memory I have is of Kevin's small hand shaking in mine. After that, we went to live in a children's home. The staff there were kind, and we quickly got along with the other kids. But no matter how familiar our surroundings became, there was always a hollow ache inside me. I wanted to see Kevin smile, so I promised myself I wouldn't cry in front of him. I thought if I cry, he'll be sad too. Being a big sister became my reason to keep going. I didn't deal with my own loss. Instead, I focused entirely on taking care of Kevin. Taking care of him gave me purpose. When I turned 18, I had to leave the children's home. There were programs to help us pursue college, but I chose not to use them. If anyone was going to college, it had to be Kevin. I started working during the day and attended night classes at a vocational school. I studied event planning. I had a small dream of starting my own business someday, but that dream felt distant. My main goal was to support Kevin. I even took out loans to make sure he could go to college. I knew a scholarship could help, but I didn't want Kevin to worry about finances. While I worked, Kevin was working hard at his studies. Watching him study fueled my resolve to support him however I could. And Kevin didn't let me down. He graduated from college and landed a job at a large company. I couldn't hold back my tears when I heard the news. All those years of hard work and debt were finally worth it. As long as I could see him happy, every struggle felt meaningful. After starting his job, Kevin began sending me $1,500 a month. I wanted to tell him to keep the money for himself, but his message left me speechless. Sis, you did everything for me. Not giving something back would feel wrong. Please accept this. Reading his words, I cried again. It moved me to know he recognized my sacrifices. But I also felt a strong sense that I couldn't keep relying on him. So I quietly started saving the money. I wanted to return it to him one day if he ever needed help. With the skills I had learned in school, I started a small event planning company. At first, I worked alone, but over time, business grew and I became busier. Kevin started helping me on weekends, even though his job was demanding. Then one day, Kevin told me he had started dating someone, Emma. She worked at a partner company, and Kevin seemed thrilled. Seeing his happiness made me genuinely happy for him. But I also felt an odd pang. Was it loneliness? The fear of losing him? I congratulated him, smiling, but inside I felt a mixture of emotions. Emma seemed like a good person. She made Kevin happy, and when we met, she appeared polite and kind. But sometimes her smiles felt a bit distant. When we met with Emma's family for a pre-wedding dinner, that feeling became even clearer. We gathered at a nice Japanese restaurant. Emma's parents were sophisticated, but something about them felt subtly dismissive. Kay, you've come so far growing up in a children's home. I mean, how admirable, her mother said. Her words seemed harmless, but they stung. Her tone was friendly, yet her eyes held a judgmental gaze. I wouldn't have come this far without my sister, Kevin answered politely, but his voice was tense. He always spoke proudly about our past, but here it felt like he was holding back. I wanted to speak up, but I couldn't ruin Kevin's happiness. After dinner, he told me not to worry, but his words only made the pain sharper. I could see he was hurt too, but he was doing his best to make things work. I wanted him to be happy above all else. Despite the uneasy feeling, I tried to connect with Emma. As the wedding plans went on, I spent time with her, reviewing guest lists, picking out dresses. Emma was always polite, but there was still a coldness in her manner. Is Kevin still sending you money? Her question hit me like a stone. Honestly, I think it's a bit much now that we're getting married. Our finances should come first. I felt speechless. I knew she wasn't entirely wrong, but she couldn't understand. To Kevin, that money was more than repayment. It was a symbol of the life we built together. Still, Emma had a point. It was probably time to draw a line. That night, I decided to talk to Kevin. Emma doesn't seem too happy about the money, does she? I figured she'd bring it up, he said, looking resigned but determined. Maybe it's time to stop, Kevin. You have a family to focus on now. My heart ached as I said it. I'm not stopping, Jane.
You've done so much for me.
I can't just quit now. His words brought tears to my eyes, but I couldn't let him see that. All right, Kevin. I understand. I knew that forcing him to stop would only make him more determined. For now, I'd let him make his choice. The wedding day finally came. I did everything I could to support their happiness. Kevin's happiness was all I'd ever wanted, but deep down, I still had an uneasy feeling. Would Emma really be the one to support him the way he needed? The ceremony went smoothly, and I felt a wave of relief. Watching Kevin smile gave me a sense of peace, as though all my sacrifices had been worth it. But then, during the reception, the unexpected happened. "Please stop coming to visit, Kevin." Her words were like a knife to my heart. The room went silent, and I felt every gaze turn toward me. I stood there, stunned, unable to respond. I could feel my face go pale, my heart sinking. Emma's gaze was sharp, as if to say I didn't belong here. I wanted to say something, but no words came out. My throat tightened with anger, sadness, and humiliation. I managed to say the only thing I could. "I understand." My own voice sounded distant and unfamiliar. I tried to keep my composure, to leave without causing more of a scene. But just as I reached for the door, I heard a loud crash. I turned around to see Kevin standing, his face filled with anger. "Emma, do you even know what you just said?" Emma looked taken aback, but couldn't shake off his grip. "You don't know anything about what she's done for me," Kevin said. His voice was low, but filled with rage. "Without my sister, I wouldn't be here today. She sacrificed everything to make my dreams possible." His words rang through the room, and nobody dared interrupt. "I send her money every month because it's the least I can do for what she's given up for me. That's not charity. It's respect and gratitude." Emma stood frozen, shock and fear in her eyes. The family and guests around us began murmuring. "I've known Jane my whole life. She's always put others before herself." One by one, my relatives and friends started speaking up. "She helped Kevin through so much. We all know how much she's done for this family." Emma's face turned pale as the guests voiced their support for me. Then one of Kevin's colleagues stepped forward. "Honestly, Emma can be difficult at work. She's known for her sharp tongue." Another colleague joined in. "It's true. She can be overly harsh, always pushing others down." Slowly, her colleagues revealed sides of Emma I hadn't known. With each confession, Emma's face grew paler, realizing the respect she thought she'd earned was slipping away. Just then, the doors opened, and a man entered the room. He was impeccably dressed, a quiet strength radiating from him. "My apologies for being late. Mr. Jameson, welcome." Mr. Jameson was a prominent figure, a senior manager from a major business partner of Emma's family's company. "Is something the matter here?" "Oh, no, Mr. Jameson. Just a family misunderstanding." "I see," he said, but his eyes told me he sensed more than he let on. "You must be Jane. I've heard impressive things about your event planning company." "Thank you, Mr. Jameson." I was surprised that he knew about my work. "Jane is a foster home graduate. I'm sure we'll want to evaluate partnerships with that in mind," Emma's father said dismissively. "Actually, I grew up in foster care myself." The room fell silent, and Emma's father's face went pale. "I've always respected those who push through adversity. Jane's work reflects that spirit. At our company, we choose partners based on merit, not background. Excluding someone due to their past would be against our values." His words filled me with pride and gratitude. Jane's been a pillar for our community. Emma's words were out of line. "I agree. Our family deserves better." Kevin's words rang with finality. "I can't marry someone who doesn't respect my family." Emma looked stricken but couldn't protest. Kevin walked over and hugged me tightly. "Thank you, Jane, for everything." "Thank you, Kevin. I'll always be here for you." That moment marked a new beginning. Over time, my business grew thanks to Mr. Jameson's support. I became known for my dedication and creativity in event planning, and Kevin became my business partner, helping us take on new challenges together. We've come so far, Jane. We have, and I'm grateful for every step. In the end, our bond only strengthened, creating a life full of support and new opportunities. Together, we continue to move forward, building a brighter future side by side.